Okay, well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We have more people than we expected today, which is fantastic. We're really thrilled to have you join us for this panel on assistive technology. My name is Mike Hatzenbeeler. I'm the CEO of PROVAIL, and I am going to be kind of leading you through today. What we're hoping is going to happen today, and what our expectations are, is that you're going to get a chance to hear a conversation from some leaders in assistive technology, and where assistive technology is going in the future, and what we expect the impacts on the lives of people with disabilities to look like. So that's our goal. That's what we hope that you're going to get out of this. I think we've put together a great panel. I want to thank all of them for joining me today. We've got folks from Microsoft, from the University of Washington, from Tobii Dynavox, and one of our own folks from PROVAIL. And I will be introducing them each to you here shortly. I wanted to start out first by just giving a little bit of background on PROVAIL in case some of you are not familiar with PROVAIL. So we're an organization, fairly large nonprofit organization here in the greater Puget Sound area. We were founded in the early 1940s by a group of parents who all had kids with cerebral palsy. So we've been around a long time. And the vision of those parents was to create an organization that would provide support services to allow their kids to continue to live in the community rather than living in an institutional setting, and to create an organization that would grow and evolve as those children grew and evolved into adults, and continue to serve the community of individuals with disabilities in the Puget Sound area. Over our almost 80 years, we've evolved to the point today where we are, as I said, fairly large organization. We have about 430 employees across all parts of the organization. We run with about an $18 million budget. And we work in three main focus areas. The first is home and lifestyle, where we provide residential services to adults with developmental disabilities and traumatic brain injury. The second is supported employment, where we are helping high school students and adults with lots of different kinds of disabilities figure out what is exactly the right career path for them, what's the right job that matches their interests and their abilities, and then work with businesses to customize roles that we can help those individuals step into and be successful, and provide them with ongoing job coaching. And then the third focus area is mobility and communication, where we are working from school age, early elementary school age children, all the way well into adulthood, help individuals identify the right tools, mostly using assistive technology that's going to help them be as independent as they can be with their mobility and communication, and engage and participate, access the community in the ways that they want to. And what is great about today's panel is that everybody that is engaged today comes from an organization that we have partnered with in some way. And so we're really excited to get a chance to highlight those partnerships, but also give you a chance to hear from those individuals about their particular areas of expertise. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce them today, right now. The first person, and then when I get done, I'll have them all turn on their cameras, and we'll jump into the question and answer portion of the program. So first, we're joined today by Dr. Anat Caspi, who's the director of the Tasker Center for Accessible Technology at the Paul G. Allen School for Computer Science and Engineering, which is located at the University of Washington. Dr. Caspi designs for the fullness of human experience, guided by the belief that designing technology for heterogeneous populations necessarily requires mixed practices of participatory design, qualitative and quantitative methods. The Tasker Center's mission is to develop, translate, and deploy technologies with a focus on benefiting individuals with disabilities. The center has been developing open source, universally accessible technologies in the area of transportation, mobility, and contextually aware responsive environments for the past 5 years. And most recently, the center was named lead for a $12 million effort by the United States Department of Transportation to bring equity to transportation data. Next, we have Bryce Johnson, who has been designing accessible experiences and technology for over 15 years. As a member of Microsoft's team Xbox, he was part of the core team that started the inclusive design and accessibility practice. And Bryce has worked across Microsoft teams to launch the assistive technologies on the Xbox One, including Copilot. Bryce initiated and designed the first inclusive tech lab at Microsoft, which has now hosted over 7,000 visitors. It's a facility where people can explore how individuals with disabilities interact with Microsoft games, services, and devices. And Bryce is one of the inventors of the Xbox Adaptive Controller, as he was a lead on its project at the 2016 Microsoft One Week Hackathon. Bryce is now a senior user researcher for Microsoft devices, where he is devoted to ensuring Microsoft products are accessible. And we are also joined by our very own Gabriel Ligo. Gabriel is a certified occupational therapy assistant and an assistive technology specialist who's been with PROVAIL for 28 years. Gabriel established and led the assistive technology program at PROVAIL and provides customized AT services and solutions to individuals in the Puget Sound area. In 2013, he became a faculty member of the Green River College Occupational Therapy Assistant Program and remains an adjunct instructor. Gabriel consults on accessible gaming development with Seattle area companies and manages the day-to-day operation of the Pacific Northwest Adaptive Toy Library, which is a joint program between PROVAIL, the University of Washington Tasker Center, where Dr. Caspi works, and the Husky Adapt student organization. And finally, we are pleased to have join us today Patrick Brune of Tobii Dynavox. Patrick is a speech language pathologist and has provided assessment, therapy, and consultation services for children and adults with disabilities for over 30 years. He worked as a clinical supervisor for Queens College in New York and as a related service provider for the New York City Department of Education. Patrick is the senior learning consultant for the Tobii Dynavox Learning Services team and provides AAC implementation support and workshops. So thank you to all of our panelists for being here. And before we get started, I want to encourage audience members to submit questions to us as we go through the panelists at any time. We have somebody that's monitoring the chat box who will send your questions my way. Towards the end of the panel, we'll take questions from the audience. So panelists, if you're ready to join me now, go ahead and turn your cameras on and we'll jump in. All right, I see Dr. Caspi and Gabriel and Patrick and Bryce. We don't quite have your camera on.
Yeah, I think someone shut my, oh, there we go.
There you go. All right, we got you now.
Someone shut me off.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
So,
thank you.
I am going to start with a question to all of you, and maybe we'll let Dr. Caspi go first. Would you mind telling us a little bit about what led you to your role in the assistive technology field?
Sure. Yeah, so I actually started out in bioengineering and I worked in the laboratory and medical instrumentation field for a long time. As an algorithms engineer, my background is in machine learning and artificial intelligence. And little by little, we saw our instrumentation go out into the field, but really was not designed for everybody in mind. There was a very specific kind of user that was presumed to be present in the lab or in a medical facility operating these instruments. And so I was interested in design and user experience and the ability to really design for a swath of heterogeneous abilities and sizes and all kinds of bodies. And that really wasn't part of this industry. So that was kind of my first venture into design and design equity. And then I also had had my daughter in 2011, and she was diagnosed with a disabling neuromuscular condition. And that was really my first personal foray into the world of assistive technology and what kinds of design options are currently available there. Um, anyway, many iterations later, I found myself back in academia and working in this area, which is just a fascinating, both in terms of the experience and the kind of backgrounds that people present in coming into this field, but also the opportunities that are currently there given the kind of timing that we're on. And I don't want to take up everybody's time right now, but we're in a very specific kind of point in time where a lot of industries have come together to make it really feasible to provide assistive technology at lower costs with lower barrier to entry. And I find that to be very exciting in this area right now.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Patrick, how about next? You started as a
Sure.
speech language pathologist. What led you
Yeah.
from that into what you're doing today?
Well, I had an older brother, about 10 years older, who had cerebral palsy. And so I was with him at speech therapy lessons and all of that as he was doing that, as he was growing up. And that's where I kind of came into speech pathology. And then through the process, gosh, like I said, I've been in this for over 30 years. So AAC and technology just sort of started with when I was in undergraduate and graduate, and I just kept thinking, I wonder if he could use this. I wonder if he could use this. And so that is how it really started, was sort of this family connection, and then just stayed connected to the field.
That's great. I should also have you just give a real quick profile for folks who are not familiar with Tobii Dynavox.
Okay. Yep. Tobii Dynavox is a manufacturing company. We produce hardware and software that supports individuals with complex communication needs. So, and individuals who are supporting, who need, like access issues from eye gaze to, individuals, kids, as well as adults, maybe ALS, who are using supports. So really the whole gamut, the whole support of communication, we want to provide those individuals. In fact, even in the Seattle area is Emily Conklin, one of our solutions consultants. And so the company is just really committed to making sure that there's people nearby to really help support and provide those resources when needed.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Bryce, how about you? What has brought you to where you are in this assistive technology space today?
Well, I don't really have a catalyst in my origin story like I think a lot of people expect. I made web pages. Making them for everybody made sense. So that was in WCAG 1. My journey as a designer has basically taken me from being a solutions provider and building web pages for various verticals and industries, and then I joined Microsoft, and I basically went on the other side and started actually developing the technology that people would use instead of just the things that are used with it. In Xbox, we had an opportunity to look at accessibility. I will say that in gaming, back in those days, there wasn't a lot of people who really kind of understood or valued accessibility. I think it's not really an industry secret that like gaming a few years ago was really about gamers servicing other gamers. So it was like you built things for yourself basically. And so when we started to look at accessibility in Xbox, we took a very traditional route. We looked at transferring things from other operating systems, other assistive technologies, and putting them in the context of a couch kind of TV existence. And the first thing that we kind of came across was realizing the inherent barriers in one of these things, right? Like these things are so over optimized that if you don't have like basically the ability to have fluid motion with your index fingers and thumbs and hold them 2 inches apart, then this isn't really the greatest. And that led to a hackathon, which led to the development of the Xbox Adaptive Controller.
All right. I love that story. Gabriel.
Yeah, so as you said earlier, Mike, I've been here at PROVAIL for 28 years. And near the beginning of that stretch, through the 1990s, PROVAIL had started the process of moving all of our clients out of what was essentially a nursing home type setting into their individual homes in the community. And I had the awesome opportunity to join a team whose job it was to help prepare the clients to for that transition and to be ready to be more independent, make more choices, and be able to live successfully in their community. And through that, quickly, we saw all these barriers that needed to be overcome somehow for our clients. And so that's kind of how I jumped into working with assistive technology and figuring out how to make all kinds of accommodations for mobility, accessing the community, communication, you name it, all kinds of different needs, which has kind of really stayed consistent for me, being a little bit broader in what kinds of things I tackle with clients to try to make accessible, just based on the needs that present themselves. Yeah.
That's great. All right. And if any of you are intrigued by Gabe's history with the organization, it's a great story. I encourage you to follow up with him and learn more about it. I think Gabe is one of the people in the Pacific Northwest who has more in-depth knowledge about how assistive technology affects the lives of individuals with complex disabilities than just about anybody else. So PROVAIL is incredibly fortunate to have him as a part of our team. So thank you, Gabe. Okay, so next question. I'm again going to throw this out to everybody. Would love to have each of you answer this, but I'm going to be a little bit specific. So assistive technology has evolved substantially over the years, particularly in recent history. Bryce kind of highlighted that a little bit. So can you pick one change that you've seen in the field since you've been in the field that you think is most significant? Sort of what's at the top of the list? So who wants to go first?
I sure can jump in there if that's okay to start.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but for me, it's just the access to the technology, you know, from technology just being, you know, smaller, faster, more durable. There's a really neat video that a young man with cerebral palsy made. His name is Brad, and it's called The Evolution of AAC. And it's just a YouTube video about 15 minutes that he created and with a communication partner. And it was just amazing. He looked at the whole series of his very first communication system, was a low-tech book, all the way up to he uses our PCI, our eye tracking hardware and software on his computer. And it just was amazing to see this this timeline from when he started as a young boy and then up to now as this young adult. And it really was just amazing. But to me, it's that change in access to great hardware that's now, like now we can use the eye tracking outside in sunlight. It's durable. All the technology they're trying to make more durable, so it's water resistant and dust resistant. You know, really making communication available for everybody in any situations. Speakers are louder. I mean, I remember just when things just started, there was just these really small environments where our communicators could be really successful. And I just see this move to really embrace everything they want to do and make everything they want to do possible, even if they might not have thought that it was. I know, like within Tobii Dynavox, our goal is to let everyone keep doing what they've always been doing, and then let them do things that they never thought were possible. And that's really just this access to all this technology, communication, resources. That's just what I see as such an amazing change.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what you said there, Patrick. Access to the solutions is so key, and a lot of it is a lot more attainable for clients than it used to be. And there's a lot of reasons for that, I think. It's hard to pick just a few.
Right.
For example, it used to be that only specialists like myself and a very few handful of assistive technology companies were the only place you could go to find a solution, and that was it. And now there are so many different groups and people that are involved than it used to be, and that just is really exploding the options. And one part of that I am really excited about and really hope continues to grow is with some of these mainstream companies getting involved in assistive technology where that is totally not their focus. I mean, so, you know, Microsoft is an example with the work Bryce is doing. Certainly they've always had assistive technology as part of like Windows, but you know, when they came out with that adaptive controller, that was a game changer, not just because it's an excellent tool that helps a lot of people, but you know, they put that out there for $99, knowing that they would lose money, I think, on everyone they sold. But that's not why they did it. And to do that, it just says so much. Another example is the Logitech company that came out with this bundle of adapted switches that people can get. I forget, I think it's like 12 switches for $99 again. You compare that to any other commercially available switches and it's far less. So these kinds of partnerships where bigger companies that can afford to produce these items, that just opens so many possibilities for our population.
Yeah, I'm really inspired by how people are embracing multimodal input because of all the things that are kind of happening around them in the world. You know, when I started in computing, it was mouse and keyboard, two different modalities, but still pretty homogenous. And now we have this opportunity to like think about input with voice, and we can think about it with eye tracking, and we can think about it with like physical manipulation, and above and beyond all of that, we can think about them all in parallel, and you don't have to pick one, right? I think that's one of the things that I think is kind of the next sort of frontier for us is just getting over the because here's the thing. I work with a lot of you know, vets that will like lose they'll be amputated in service. They're now limb different, and they come to me and they go, I need a one-handed controller, and they say, I need a one-handed controller because I have one hand. And we kind of like ask them really seriously, well, what else you got? Like, stop telling me what you don't have and tell me what you do have, right? And like, let's put the input to you. And that's what really, I think, inspires us and what we try to do going forward. That's what excites us.
Yeah, I think so. I think the way it was expressed, I would totally agree with Gabe that I have a colleague by the name of Richard Ladner, whose daughter actually works for PROVAIL, and he always says, yeah, accessibility is now going mainstream. And that's kind of what you're seeing with larger companies taking on the challenges of inclusive design. But I think to me, the biggest game changer is the understanding that platforms are becoming multimodal and data standards are becoming the only way to develop. And so that means that we see iOS and Android and Microsoft platforms becoming accessible in the sense that whatever input or output modalities you require, they will play nice interchangeably. And to me, that's the biggest game changer, because the integration of what used to be these one-of solutions that would be an add-on to all of these, typical devices that we would see on the market, was not going anywhere. It wasn't really helping people, because there was always this problem with backward incompatibility, and the fact that the older version didn't play nice with the next version, and always having to keep up with the platforms and what they were doing. And now that the platforms are more and more accessible to all kinds of input and output devices, that to me is really the game changer in this arena.
All right, great answers. So Patrick and Anat, so you guys both work closely with assistive technology. Patrick, you particularly with AAC, and we've seen a lot of evolution, particularly in the AAC field. I can remember, and I'm not a specialist. I don't involve myself in this work directly, but in my interaction with individuals with disabilities, I remember what I saw in 1995 when I first came to PROVAIL, what the technology looked like then, and how, as you commented earlier, Patrick, how limited its usefulness was in many settings. I can remember being with people in a room with fluorescent lights where you literally could not read the LCD screen. And so there's been a lot of evolution. You guys have talked about some of the key changes. What do you see as the key steps that are coming next? Where do you see the key future steps of evolution look like in AAC, and then not in broader accessible technology?
Patrick, do you want to
Okay,
start?
I'll just start with the AAC. I just see it moving so much more than just, let's just let someone be able to request their basic wants and needs, which is sometimes what it was at the very beginning. Let's just get that. And I get it. That's so important. But now I see, especially with Tobii Dynavox, just a push to make sure that we're incorporating everything everyone wants to do, from social media, those productivity apps, just everything about what the world is doing. That's what we want to give to our individuals as well. And, it's this push even within our technology to make sure it's something that can be used outside, inside, with every person. I just love what Bryce said. I think AAC is, I always found when I was on assessment teams back at the University of Nebraska, at the Med Center, that was one of my first jobs on the assessment team. And it was always about, I don't care what you can't do. Let's look can do right here. And I always found AAC evals just to be incredibly empowering, because it was just about, let's just start with what you're doing and let's just build on that. And I really see within the company that same kind of technology, wanting to just keep empowering them to keep doing more and more and more. And so everything we do, it's just, we have so many more people, not just our little closed circle of therapists. We just have everyone from communication partners to other individuals who are using AAC, always bringing in what they need and really guiding us in that direction. But I just thought Bryce just hit it right on the point. I don't care what you can't do. Let's just look at what you can do and start building on that. And I think Gabriel and everyone, that's always the most empowering thing about AAC. And that's exactly what Tobii Dynavox is really trying to bring. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I would tend to agree that, until, I would even say, like 3 or 4 years ago, and this had to do with the legal ecosystem of this as well in the US, but communication devices really just focused on speech generation.
Yeah.
And that was it. And a lot of it had to do with the Medicare definition of communication devices and how they were willing to fund it, because communication was deemed a necessity, but things like email and web browsing was not. And so a lot of the state-sponsored devices were actually disallowed from opening up to internet access. And thankfully, a legal battle won this.
Yeah.
That opened a whole host of other possibilities. But I did want to say that now I see communication devices as not just speech generating, but I see a lot of movement towards more natural language kind of display. So gesturing, the ability to put in inflection into the speech. Of course, access to all of these internet modalities, but I also think it's really important to consider 2D and 3D interaction space, which is now becoming more and more available to input devices like eye gaze. For example, my daughter plays a game where she roams around a 3D interaction space. And to me, that's impressive considering she's using an eye gaze, like a pupil tracking device to do that. So I'm really looking forward to the time where communication devices can also be used to manipulate 3D interactions, both in physical space as well as in VR, AR, and modalities like that.
Great. Thank you. Thank you both. So next question, and again, I'll kind of throw this out to everybody. In recent years, we have seen a real shift, and Gabe kind of alluded to this earlier. The maker movement and DIY has come to, and the hacker culture have come to the assistive technology field. And individuals are getting a chance to be the creator rather than just the consumer of modern technology in general, and particularly in assistive technology. And you can see that at PROVAIL with the development of the lending toy library, which again is a joint project with the Tasker Center and Husky Adapt. And we've been doing the toy hackathons. How do you see this movement really increasing accessibility more broadly to assistive technology? So this maker movement, the DIY, the hacker culture, how's that opening up accessibility?
You want to
Dave,
get?
you want to start?
This is the thing that I am the most excited about, the most jazzed about in assistive technology since I've been in it. There are so many different people now coming and getting involved. You've got, starting branching out from a specialist to working with other therapists and teachers and paraprofessionals in schools, to collaborating with high school students who need to do projects and have access to 3D printers at school, and STEM programs and all this great stuff, and even hobbyists at local maker spaces, all and families, of course, all coming together, working on finding and making solutions for people. Like you mentioned, Mike, the maker events that we try to do regularly, that has brought in people, all those different people you mentioned. We did one in 19 with Microsoft, lots of people from other companies that especially from a tech background, that come in, don't have any other connection, but get involved, and then just are like super jazzed about what they're getting to participate in. It's not just a win for finding a solution for a client. There is this wonderful learning and connecting, so that these people are learning what the challenges are and how they can help for people with disabilities, and there's just growth everywhere. It's really a fabulous thing to be a part of.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is how the off-the-shelf consumer electronics have addressed innovation. And really, it started out with very small companies that were trying to make these hardware and circuit type devices accessible. And then it grew to platform makers like Microsoft and Intel trying to address the maker culture as well, because they see how that can progress from small community-based innovation to drive the starts of companies and innovations that can really present themselves to niche kinds of markets that weren't necessarily addressed beforehand. So I do think that it's really great that we see so much more of this type of work in schools. You know, at UW with Husky Adapt, we do a lot of hacking just, you know, to engage people in learning how to analyze circuits and be able to see what's needed in order to adapt a toy and add the universal jack that would allow for any kind of input device to work with it. But that team has also been going out to high schoolers, really trying to bring that culture to people at a very young age so they can even start that kind of design thinking going forward and be aware of inclusive design. I think we find so many people are just not aware of the challenges, as Gabe said, and this kind of movement really brings both the needs as well as the skills to a wide swath of diverse populations. I should also say,
Yeah,
sorry, that
go ahead.
a lot of students from diverse backgrounds, so women, minorities, people who haven't necessarily been attracted to engineering in the past, when they see the connection between what these kinds of skills can bring forward to, you know, a cause to some extent, or what kind of impact they can make with engineering, that tends to keep people around much longer, and that too is a nice sort of side product of this.
Absolutely. That's a great benefit. I just wanted to comment on one thing that you mentioned, Dr. Caspi, that I think is particularly interesting is we've kind of come full circle where a lot of this technology that is at the core of particularly AAC, but lots of accessible devices started as garage technology. It was very much, you know, do it yourself kinds of things that somebody, in many cases, probably people who were family members of individuals like you, Patrick,
Mhm.
who had a family member with a disability, kind of but an interest in this engineering or to end technology developing in the garage. Then it moved to become much more mainstream, and large corporate platforms were adopting, and now we're now getting back into having more of that DIY culture involved again. And I think that's a fascinating aspect of this field.
You know, I just kind of want to add here, there's many aspects to this, I think. And I will tell you that when we developed the adaptive controller, we made an assumption that the community was much more, had much more technical acumen than they actually do. We worked with a lot, because most of the people that we engaged with early on were makers, right? And so I will say that in some ways, it caught us a little off guard. And we were always going to put out a product that addressed the needs of because so here in the beginning, we thought there were people with disabilities and makers that supported them. And what we learned really quickly was that the average caregiver is not necessarily a maker, and that it is a mistake to assume that it is easy for someone to learn a technology that they do not personally use. Right. And I think that insight is something that's kind of grounded us. I know lots of caregivers learn all kinds of tech, but I have seen tons of caregivers who spend a lot of money on specialized AT just to leave it in default mode. Right. And so I think there's a balance. And I think that balance has to come from a number, like we will always try to support makers as best we can, but we do balance it with this idea that, well, if someone just gets something and they don't have like a maker background, they still need to be able to use it. And so it's certainly tricky. And I think that the way that you engage there is something that I would kind of like to push back onto the community a little bit. You know, we get a lot of people who come to us and they go, well, I want to make custom rigs, but I'm not a maker. I can't 3D print. And I'm like, can you use Sculpey? Can you woodwork? Right? Like, you know, like this type of stuff. Right. And and that kind of shocks them. Like a lot of the time, like people are like, oh, but I'm like, just make a wooden box, man, put some buttons in it, you know? So those are the types of things that I think we have to balance.
Great, good comment.
I wanted to mention, it's related to this specific topic, the name of some organizations that are very closely tied to all of this. There is atmakers.org, which is led by Bill Binko. And for those in the community, he just got out of the hospital recovering from COVID, so he's in my thoughts. But that organization is all about, you know, making solutions for people from low tech to high tech and teaching how to make affordable custom circuit boards and, you know, kind of really getting in there for those that are into that level of it. There is Warfighter Engaged, another great nonprofit that is making a lot of really cool accessories that work great with the adaptive controller. And they are all about having adaptive gaming accessible. Their mission is for vets, but their stuff works for a wide variety of people. And it, again, back to one of my big points, their stuff is very affordable, which means it can actually get into people's hands easily. There's another organization just north of us in Canada called Makers Making Change, and they are literally an international effort to do all this maker, do-it-yourself kind of a thing, bringing people together to meet people's needs. Somebody in the chat just asked me to mention another individual that I had talked about somewhere else. There is a really talented engineer her name is Therese Wilcombe, who builds all kinds of amazing stuff from like political yard signs and just stuff that's super easy to work with. So yeah, those are all great resources. If you want to know more about this stuff, go Google those names. There's a lot of really cool stuff you'll find.
Could someone throw her name in the chat and the other names as well? I do. It is funny because I did see that woman's work, and I know in the last you know, the last local election pre-COVID, I brought an OT that works with us. Like I just walked around and brought like a mountain of like political signs that I picked up off the street, you know, after the election was over. And yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So I want to go, I'm actually going to, Bailey and Jessica are going to freak out by this a little bit. I want to go a little bit off script here and ask a question that's not on my list, but I think you guys have pointed to it. And maybe this will be our last question before we take questions from the audience. So how, if the purpose of this assistive technology is to ensure that we are increasing inclusion and access for people with disabilities, and many of you are pointing to aspects of even on the maker side, and you've pointed out a little bit of the sort of easier way, Bryce, for some people to get involved in that, but there's a fair amount of complexity to some of this technology. So how do we ensure, given that the whole idea is to increase access, increase inclusion, and we're dealing with technology that has some complexity to it, how do we make sure that we're continuing to move forward on that goal of increasing access and increasing inclusion? And any of you that want to jump in and approach that.
You know, from Tobii Dynavox, we've really taken a step back, and we're actually working. We've kind of broke up into these teams, our learning team, and we're trying to create these learning paths for family members, learning paths for individuals who are using AAC, really working on this sort of out of the box experience so that people can, we're trying to empower them to be able to feel comfortable with some of this without saying, here, now you be the therapist. You know, in COVID times, we really have kind of all of a sudden had to put a lot of responsibility back on individuals saying, hey, we can't get out there to help with setup or do any of this. And it really made us take a step back and say, we need to start providing these resources so people can hit the ground running without feeling like they've, you know, needed a PhD or a degree in this area. So for us, it has been trying to pull back and provide these resources through what we have, this learning hub that we've set up, but we're really tasking ourselves to think about, Mike, exactly what you said, how we can start providing the supports in different ways than that.
I think one aspect of this that ought to be considered is the fact that we're actually designing for a team rather than designing. There's a primary user indeed, and that's the most important user, but there's a network or a constellation of others that are involved intimately sometimes with these technologies. And it's often really clear that there's a dissonance there between what the designer was thinking about versus, the parent, the therapist, and how they can integrate into the work that the primary user is doing. So a lot of times I think about AT as, being designed for a team and potentially even offering different kinds of user experiences that take that into consideration, that could help that ecosystem a lot, I believe.
I would totally agree there, and I would kind of add to that here's the trick. I know that like people who've made AT in the past have, people have a lot of different needs, so you try to offer a lot of value in terms of the features that you offer and all of that. But I think that there's a point where technologists make things too complicated, right? Like I've gone through to a lot of really great engineers at Microsoft who've taken an adaptive controller and they've gone to someone's house and they've set up a system for them. And it's been like multiple steps of interop between each thing. Like, it's like, oh, well, great. You've got like this voice controller that does this other thing that hooks into this, that does, all this stuff. But it's like, if one part breaks, the whole thing's gone. And, and so just to kind of get back to this, I don't know if this is the correct idea, but so here's the back of an adaptive controller. It has 19 ports, 19 3.5mm ports. There are 17 buttons on an Xbox controller. That means there's one for every button and one extra one. And everyone that we talked to in the AT communities we were developing said, you need about 6 ports. No one's going to really have the ability to be able to press more than 6 buttons. So you need about 6 ports. And we fought against that. And whether that's true or not, that was this kind of prevailing idea, was that, no, you provide ports and then you provide software to configure the ports, right? And we saw again and again, sorry, I'm just going to grab something. We saw again and again, that there was these caregivers that just, they don't have time. Even OTs that just don't have time to crack this thing into software, when all you could do is if you want to make this, right now, this is right trigger. And if I wanted to make it the A button, I could unplug it and I can plug it in here. And now it's the A button. No software, no whatever, and I think it's finding these balances of simplicity for the team and power, and understanding those balances that I think is going to be really interesting for us as a community. Because some of my favorite devices, I know that they do 100 more things than I can do on them, but it's just, it's sometimes it's a lot. And I work in this, right?
Right. Okay. Well, I'm going to shift now to taking some questions from the audience, if that's okay. So the first question is, can very young children use this type of technology? And we've talked about a lot of different types of technology. So I guess maybe any of you, what aspects of what you've talked about are accessible to very young children?
To some extent, all of it.
Yeah.
I mean, all the toys that we see behind Gabe, they might not be all of them age appropriate for a 6-month-old, but it's never too early to start looking at cause and effect as a developmental goal, with whatever switch is accessible to a child. So I think, yeah, and I think as we're talking about the family constellation that supports this, it's really important for families to get started early because it's all learning steps. And it's not like it comes like manna from the sky. It's, some of it is harder than other things, and it's really good to get acquainted early, even if you're not going to use it right away.
Yeah, we've really found that there are no prerequisites to any of this. You know, in an individual, if they need support through communication and learning, it is to get involved right away. They don't need to start with one thing and move to another and move to another. It really has been found, like even just within Tobii Dynavox, just getting individuals the opportunity to participate and involve and using the communication systems early on just helps build that foundation for language and learning and all of these, cognitive goals that move along the way. It's just about getting them involved early.
Yeah, I was trying to find an example video that I use all the time, but I can't seem to find it. When we introduced a feature on Xbox before the adaptive controller, we introduced a feature called Copilot, which basically said you could take two controllers and make them one controller. And this was we came at it from a place of like, well, I could do this, right? I could have like one on my chin and one on my hand. I have modularity and control. I'm going beyond this notion of like I said, 2 inches apart. But when the adaptive controller came out, it was also so you could use this and the adaptive controller, you could mix and match a bunch of things. But we also, we called it Copilot because we actually thought about a Copilot. So I get a lot of parents who will reach out to me and they'll say, here's a question I get often, and here's the answer, and you might like it or you might not. I get a lot of parents who come up to me and they go, well, I have a kid with disabilities and they want to play video games just like their siblings. What video games can my young child play? And I go, well, what video games are their siblings playing? And they're playing Fortnite and they're playing Roblox. And I go, well, then you should have them play Fortnite and Roblox, because any other baby game that you give them, they're just going to hate. Right? They're going to want to play the games that their siblings play. And then I get this inevitable question, but they can't do that type of complexity. And then we bring in Copilot and I say, be the Copilot, right? Like, be there for your kid and do the things that they can't do. So if your kid can only move one trigger or one joystick and maybe press one button, then make that aim and shoot or whatever. Like, make it the fun stuff, and then you do all the other stuff. And they're like, but I'm not a gamer. And I'm like, get good, time to hit the console. Sorry, and that's not the answer that they always like. But I think when it comes to young kids, yeah, I mean, like, it's how do we figure out ways with tech and with other methods so that people can participate equally? That's always the ultimate goal, right? And if enlisting a Copilot is what you need, then let's do it.
Yeah.
I want to share a quick story related to what Bryce was just talking about. We run these computer groups at PROVAIL in normal times, and these three individuals, friends of each other, they came and they were expressing a desire to play this one particular tank game where you drive around in a tank, and you blow up things. But none of these guys could play this by themselves, not even close. So we set them up with this kind of a Copilot kind of a feature where the individual who had the most control, he was driving the tank. And so he could manipulate one joystick, but that was about all he could handle. And then the next gentleman, he could handle a couple of switches. So he moved the turret of the tank around, and he had that down great. And then the last guy, he was really very much limited to just a single switch. So he got to be the gunner. So just like in real life, these three guys are cruising around, playing their tank game, And I can't express how much fun they were having doing this. You know, they were working cooperatively, maximizing what they were capable of. Everybody was equally important. It was a pretty amazing moment.
Yeah. Okay, another question. And Bryce, I think you addressed this a little bit in the chat, but I just want to throw it out there. How's the local tech sector coming together to support this work? Can this sector be engaged to do more when it comes to tech devices and solutions for people with various abilities?
Yeah, and I'll just basically speak to my answer, and I will preface it that this is a me answer and not a Microsoft answer. I would personally love it if the local community engaged us more. I mean, the local community is as rich as any. You know, when we started, we had these partners from all over the country, and we still do. But being able to like call up Gabe and like, you know, ask questions is really kind of important. Or you know, to hang out at a Here and Now Foundation, you know, event. Like those things are important. But I will say, like, you know, we're a pretty big place at Microsoft. It's difficult. It takes a while for us to get off the campus, I guess is basically what I'm saying. So, you know, I personally would really welcome a lot more structured local community engagement, but it has to be a two-way street. Like you know, I show up where I can, and I show up where I can, but I would love it if people kind of like knocked on our door too. You know,
That's a good point. Well, we appreciate you showing up here today, and Dr. Caspi and Patrick and Gabriel, we appreciate you guys showing up here as well. Thank you so much. Obviously, we have just touched the tip of the iceberg on this topic, and we could do this for several hours and still only be above the surface of the water on the iceberg. But hopefully, audience, we've given you a little more insight than you came into it with in terms of how this technology has evolved and advanced, where it's headed, and the impact that it has on the lives of individuals with disabilities. And if you are interested in knowing more about that topic, if you're particularly interested in knowing more about what PROVAIL's work is, you want to maybe connect more with Gabe, we're going to put Gabe's contact information in the chat box for you. We're also going to put a video, a link to a YouTube video, and maybe we can track down the video that Patrick talked about earlier, evolution of AAC. Is that what it was called, Patrick?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Let's try to track that one down and share that in case folks want to check that out as well. So that if you'd like to, you know, check it out more. I hope one of the things that you came away from this session with, Dr. Caspi used the term family constellation. I thought that was great. And we often talk about that, you know, this work to increase inclusion is work that takes a village. You know, whatever phrase, whether you want to call a village or a team, a family, a constellation, hopefully what you've picked up out of this is that in most cases, it's not about just, you know, whether it is Bryce's wooden box or something that comes out of a 3D printer, or the most advanced eye gaze device from Tobii Dynavox. It isn't a matter of just handing the device over to somebody and expecting that to be a life-changing moment. It takes a team of people, family members, professionals like the folks that you got a chance to hear from today, and lots of other people in order to ensure that the promise of that technology is actually delivered to the individuals that are seeking it. And so hopefully that's been an impactful opportunity for you to hear about that today. We really appreciate everybody being with us. Again, panelists, thank you so much. It's a pleasure for us to get to partner with all of you. And we're grateful that you took some time to be a part of the presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
thank you.
much.
All right.